Welcome back to the workshop. It's been a few days since I've been able to get here. Day jobs piling up, trying to earn some money to pay for all these silly projects. But got back here yesterday, brought the kids along. They helped me do some tidying up, clean things around a bit, get rid of the mounting frame that the shipping packaging that the body for the 300 came on. Moved the engine around and brought some tools up as well. I've decided I'm going to have to move a good chunk of my metalworking stuff here, make some changes. You'll see some more tools coming in future episodes, maybe some changes to the workshop, making it really well set up for the things I'm trying to do. But big project for today is try and get the last bits of the adapter plate made up, get it welded up, and then maybe even get it test fitted into the car. And there we go, one welding trolley. Cheap and cheerful, but does the job and saves me lugging this bloody heavy, rusty thing around as I start to button up the new motor mounts. Quick to-do list update. I had on my list shocks and springs, new shocks and springs for the 300. And when I did the car last year, we put on a really cheap set of, I think, something Technics, whatever, cheap shocks and springs, and they've been clunking and bonking, making horrible noises as they went over bumps. And I thought they were basically just not very good. Actually, a bunch of nuts weren't really tightly done up enough. Went back, redid things, made some tweaks the other day, and all clunks and bonks, at least on the front end, are completely gone. Definitely need to rebush the back end. But now that the front's basically got a whole new set of suspension, it had new arms, new drop links when we redid it, and now that the shocks are properly adjusted, actually I'm pretty sure the shocks and springs are going to be fine. So fine, in fact, that actually I may go down the same route on the EV GT, given that they give me the adjustability that stock stuff wouldn't. So, you know, big piece of progress, and it really makes the car drive much more nicely. It's much more pleasurable to drive now. So we can cross shocks and springs off our to-do list. The first thing of all of these many things that we can cross off the list. That's all the captive nuts welded on both sides. If it looks like I've gone a little bit overboard on the welding, that's purely because a couple of the captive nuts came off on the current plate, and it's a pain in the arse. So I wanted to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I'm pretty sure these ones are not coming off. So next up, time to try and do some alignment. The tricky bit about this is, obviously the gearbox has a right way up that it needs to go to mount. If I roll this over, the gearbox has to go that way up. This adapter plate I've obviously designed, I've cut now into a rectangle, so it's going to look neat. It has to go with this vertical. The motor isn't designed to go in this orientation. It goes in a slightly different orientation, actually a very different orientation, I believe, in the Outlander diff, but I figured it would look neatest with the cable port right up top and be easiest for access as well. And I don't think it'll matter. The water jacket's still going to function the same. I can't see it having a major impact. I guess we'll see. Worst case scenario, 200 quid for a new one, but I don't think it'll be a problem. I think others are, well, I don't know about anyone that's running it, but I think others have certainly experimented with it in different orientations. So let's try and get these stacked up and see if we can get the horizontal here aligned with the horizontal of the gearbox looking straight down, and then maybe put some welds on, try it out. One slight issue I may have, is that one of these bolts may foul the center diamond on the adapter plate, but we shall see. May need to cut some of that off or trim it back a little bit with the grinder. We shall see. Houston, we have a problem. Well, actually, two problems. As you may be able to see, the adapter plate, the center diamond, is not sitting flush on this plate. It's wobbling around. Why? Because our adapter plate's actually not deep enough. The shaft in the middle of the gearbox and the shaft protruding from the motor, I believe, are touching. Now, how much is that an issue? I don't honestly know. Do I shim this out a bit to create a bit of space? I've got some spare 6mm. I could shim it out a bit. Do I just get it set up so that it's not vibrating and just weld? That feels like a bit of an ugly solution. Doesn't need much shimming, really not a lot at all, but it feels like it needs some. Second problem, as predicted, the center diamond is fouling this bolt here, which means that you can't actually rotate the top half to get it straight with the bottom half. So, options. Leave a bolt out, remove some material from the corner here. I think probably remove some material and weld up around it. So as you will have seen, I took the lazy way out of sorting out the gap and just ground a bit off the shaft in the gearbox. Fortunately, I had a few millimeters to spare. I've also trimmed off some of that center diamond of the adapter plate so that it clears that bolt. I'm probably going to take a little bit more back actually, so there's plenty of space. Because I'll have to drill a hole in the top in order to give access to those bolts in the final assembly. But if you come up to the top, and I've got a bit more checking to do on this, I haven't quite worked out how yet, but you can see now we can get pretty much straight down, and we can adjust it back and forth a little bit. So probably bolt a couple of bits to these pieces here, get those going straight down, even just stick a couple of bits of wood on there actually, going straight down just so I can get it close, because what I can't do unfortunately is put it in the car, line it all up and then tack weld it, because that would put loads of pressure on the coupler Effectively all the bending force will be on the coupler. I don't really want to do that since it is clearly very nice and straight. If I rotate the gearbox, it's in gear, there's absolutely no movement whatsoever from the adapter plate as it spins. So it's clearly very nicely aligned. So I don't want to muck around too much with that. Just want to make sure that when it goes in the car, it looks nice and neat and square. If you follow me on social media, and go find me at Book of the Future on Twitter and Instagram if you don't already, you'll know that there's been something of an interlude in this project. I left the workshop not long after the last bit of this video and then came back the next day. Wife and kids are away, nice long weekend to play in the shop, so I thought the door wouldn't open. And it slowly dawned on me that on April 1st, the standing charges on electricity had gone up and wiped out all of the credit we had on the prepay meter in the workshop. And no power means no garage door. So this morning, I've just had to come back and jury rig the garage door to get in. I mean, yesterday was bad. I was very frustrated, wound up at myself. Got worse when the alarm went off because there was no power and it discharged its emergency battery, waking up all the neighbours, and that wasn't fun. But today, you know, recovered some of my cool, feeling reasonably pleased with myself for working out how to jury rig a electric roller shutter door. So yeah, back in the garage, time to crack on. Some new parts have arrived. I'm pretty sure I've shown you these before. These are the headlights I'm planning to use for the 300. So LED, full LED sealed unit, all E-marked and everything else. But I was trying to work out how I was going to mount them into the headlight buckets. And I accidentally came across these. Someone, of course, has solved this problem and done some ready-made mounting brackets with adjustability and everything for these headlamp units. So question is, do they fit? I don't know that these fit into here. They're the same size in theory. And secondly, do the mounting brackets fit into the headlight bowls? Second question first, before I start unscrewing anything, do the mounting brackets fit in the headlight bowls? Just about. There's not a lot in it around that rim, but actually with a little bit of massaging, I think that should be a really good fit and look quite neat, especially if we use black mounting hardware. So it's just black all around the outside and then a headlamp in the middle. Right, next question, does the headlamp fit in? There we have it. They do fit indeed. Very neatly, in fact. And I think those are going to look fantastic. What I will say is the quality of these brackets is mediocre at best. The paint is incredibly thin. The slightest brush with a screwdriver as I was doing up the mounting screws has taken the finish off. So these will need probably sanding back and painting properly before I use them, which is a shame. I'm wondering about maybe, I don't know, we shall see, maybe some 3D printed trim rings that go all around the outside. Just something that just sort of pushes on and gives it a bit of cover up and neatness. But I think that's a question for down the line. Right now, that's saved me a lot of time for the sake of 20 quid. I'm going to do things the wrong way around now. I've tidied up this cutout so that you can get to the bolts from the other side, and I'd really like to weld a little plate over it to keep this sealed up, but none of my steel offcuts or sheet steel is at the workshop yet. I'm slowly ferrying stuff from home to here, and so I can't do that today without running home, which I don't really want to do. So what I'm going to do is weld the two plates together, get it all lined up and weld the two plates together, and then have to come in and do this sort of through the gap, which I know, be patient, do things the right way. No, I want to get this in the car. And I've just checked and I can get the torch in there nice and easily. So I can just sort of cut a little piece out, whack it on, weld it up, and then just use the finger sander to tidy it around the outside. And that'll be nice and neat. I want it to be nice and thin because I don't want to take too much more steel off to relieve the space for the bolt. I'm obviously going to have to drill through here as well once the two plates are welded together. So that's ready. I'm going to give this a little clean up, ready for welding, and then get the plates tacked together. And then let's test fit it to the car. If you could hear gas hissing a lot while I was welding there, it's because the solenoid is either back to front or gone on my welder, and so I'm having to just turn gas on and off fairly quickly when I want to use it. At some point I'll pull the solenoid out, try reversing it, and if not, replace it. So what I was doing there was I put a tack in, checked it still rotated freely and that there was no binding, put another tack in, repeated, put a couple more tacks in, checked again, and so on and so forth. And so now we've got tacks in all the way around, and you can see that that's in gear and turning very easily with just hand pressure. So no binding, no friction to speak of, dead easy. So now what we can do is disassemble the two, or put a few more welds in place actually, and then try bolting it up and winching it up, and yeah, sticking in the car. Not the prettiest welding job in the world. Focus, but as you can tell, it's a little bit awkward for access, getting that second plate on. It'll do for now. When I pull it up all apart, I might add some more welds, tidy it up a little bit with the finger sander, but not too bad. So there we have it. Still a lot of finishing up to do, tidying up to do, but our new transmission for the 300 bolted up and ready to test fit into the GT so we can work out engine mounts, etc. What I haven't done yet is put a loop on, put an eye on for lifting, which would have been smart. I don't really have the tools here to make that, and it being a Sunday, I'm trying not to make too much noise. So I will do that another day. For now, I'll just see if I can find some straps to get around it and move it that way. Right, under the car now, show you where I'm up to. I've bolted, just loosely, the gearbox support on. I've got the engine, or rather motor and gearbox, supported on both the engine crane and trolley jack. I had to make some adjustments to the way that it was connected to the crane at the front to make some more space, because the crane was fouling on the firewall. So as you can, don't know if you can tell from this angle, the engine's slightly canted, and it's also, the gearbox is slightly canted, and it's also a bit too far back actually, so we need to shuffle it forward a little bit, and then we should be able to line up this gearbox support with those bolts and get it bolted in, at the back at least. Pretty exciting. Gearbox mounts loosely screwed in, enough to hold it tightly at the back. It's pretty much centered, and I think I've got the gearbox fairly level. You don't want too much angle in the UJ at the back. Clears the cross member quite nicely. Does take up maybe a bit more of the engine bay than the other motor, which is rather flatter. Hoping that the new battery box is still going to fit. So next step is to get the steering rack back in, so we know what clearance we have to leave for the steering column, or the connecting rod really from the steering column. Might adjust the height a little bit. I'm not 100% sure it's quite right yet. I may need to come up a little bit. And then perhaps get the new battery box, which I've brought today, in and see if the front valance fits. Just getting the steering rack back in, and look what I noticed. The whole bit of the casting where the bolt goes through is sheared off. So the EVGT is going to need a new steering rack, unfortunately. That's a cost I hadn't accounted for. No rush on it, of course, but a bit annoying nonetheless. Not good. Right, stick a couple of bolts through there, or at least it's only worth putting one bolt in, and get it hooked up. I am quite pleased. I'll do a proper episode on the battery box soon, the new battery box soon. I've just balanced it on some concrete blocks for now, but you can see it fits with loads of room. And if you look at the height, there's also loads of space for the high voltage junction box and the charger to go up on top of it. Loads of room for the radiator here at the front. The valance goes on without an issue at all. And over the motor, we'll just be able to put centrally the inverter now, with the three phase wires going out the back of the inverter into here. All of our other connections will be, is that right? No. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, it's going to be a very short run from the inverter to the motor now. And we can probably make it a pretty short run from the high voltage junction box here up to the inverter as well. So in terms of mounts, first thing is to start connecting the adapter plate on the motor side to the engine mounts here and down here behind all this wiring. On this side it's obviously pretty straightforward. On this side it's rather trickier because you've got to avoid the steering. I've got a few thoughts. I mean, you could do what I've done last time and come up and over in a sort of U shape, but that would feel quite cluttered. So what I'm wondering instead is if I go down off the top of here, take that off, go down off the top of here, go under the steering rod, whatever you want to call it, so a sort of 90-degree almost angle of 6mm plate, maybe with a flange on here to keep it nice and strong, and then down, and then from a vertical plate with either some 40x40 or 220x20s into the adapter plate, and maybe do that at the bottom, and then we could trim off some more material from around the outside, and that would keep it all looking quite neat and uncluttered. Obviously have to do something about the hardware coming through from the gearbox. That's not exactly pretty, although that will be hidden by the inverter. Excuse me. As you can probably tell from this sort of discussion, I have ambitions for how this is going to look when it's done. I want it to be a hell of a lot neater than the current under bonnet setup. I really do want it to be neat and tidy and look good so I can show it off at shows, because I'm nothing if not a bit of a show off, as you can probably tell from the fact that I'm doing a YouTube channel. Low voltage wiring for the motor, nice and accessible, much better than on the current setup. So I'll do that in there'll be a future video about wiring up this motor. But overall, really pleased. So as I say, first things first is to work out how we come off the adapter plate and to the mounting bracket so we can get the jack out from under there. Then we have to work out a frame to go over the top here for our inverter. We also need some space for our brake booster pump and our power steering pump, and I'm thinking this gap down here would be a really nice space for a box, an insulated box to keep the noise down. It does mean that we're running a slightly odd route. I was sort of hoping to have it over here and run a really short path from power steering pump to power steering rack and from the brake booster as well, which is obviously just there. Could put them up here, I suppose. Oh, you can't even see my hand. Could put them up here, but actually that space feels good, and we can put them nice and low down. We can use the adapter plate to give us some nice strength to mount on. Maybe we leave that steel in for now and come off there with a little, not quite sure yet, some sort of frame here. So I'll measure that up and start thinking and sketching, maybe in Fusion, how we can hold those two in there. Probably need to bring the parts up as well. Maybe just screw them to a piece of plywood for a minute just so we can see if they fit side by side there. All in though, I think that is a cracking place to leave it for today. A lot of progress. I'll leave it there for this video. Huge amount of progress on the 300, albeit in the body of the GT at the moment. Really, really pleased with what I've done today. Not least breaking into my own workshop, as you'll have seen from social media if you follow me on there. But getting that motor adapter plate pretty much made up. Still needs some tidying, obviously needs painting. So I'll do some final welds, clean it all up, paint it. Probably won't bother filming that because I think I've done enough on building this adapter plate and coupler now. This will be the last episode on that. Next we'll move on to sorting out the battery box, looking at wiring, mounting brackets, so the mounts for the engine into the adapter plate, connecting them up to the motor mounts. All good, lots still to do. So thanks for watching. If you do enjoy this stuff, nonsense as it is, please do like and subscribe and check out the links on the screen. I've put a playlist up from all my Z300 videos so far.